Thomas Hatsis,
Mark Wooding.
welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
You are the Psychedelic Historian.
One of them. I think there's like 6 or 7 of us in the world.
Oh, really?
Yeah, something like that.
You guys can fit in a car.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, a clown car.
Okay, great. So, I've known you for a while. We did an amazing collaboration on LSD years ago, and I still return to that collaboration because it was just, you're such a great storyteller.
Well, thank you.
And I think it's, many of us are not aware of how much psychedelics have shaped society over the thousands of years. Mm-hmm. There's some very famous stories that I'd love for you to kind of give us the truth on today. And then there's some lesser known stories. So sure. I'm excited to get into that.
Sure. I just want to caveat the truth as best as we can know within historical probabilities.
There you go. That is the truth right
there.
Yeah,
see, that is the truth because history, it doesn't really work in absolutes. It works in probabilities. Like as a historian, especially when we're going to talk about the ancient world, then it's really your big time probabilities, like what probably happened versus, well, this happened. Any historian says, this I know happened.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what compelled you to become the psychedelic historian?
So I ate mushrooms when I was 18 for the first time. And I wanted to know everything I could about it. I wasn't going to college at the time. I was working. I got out of high school, and I think like a lot of kids in high school, it's like, all right, I'm done with this. I just want to have money in my pocket. And so I did that. I was working construction, and I split an eighth of mushrooms with a good friend of mine. And when I returned from that, I felt like I had touched something deeper than material reality. And so I wanted to know everything I could about this, about psychedelia. And I enrolled for college like a few weeks after that, I'm like, well, like I should back up and say, I came back from that first experience feeling so ignorant, just so ignorant of everything. And I'm like, where do I go from here? I had this amazing experience and I can't even put it into words. And so I originally, my undergraduate thesis was I was going to try to demonstrate how mushrooms actually do put us in touch with spiritual realities. And my thesis advisor was like, well, do you know anything about evolutionary biology? I was like, no. He's like, anything about organic chemistry? I was like, no. He's like, anything about all these hearts on my nose? He's like, well, then you absolutely can't write anything on that. And so I decided to just study the history of it because it's sort of like detective work. Figuring out the puzzle, putting the pieces together with different fragments and translating the sources and trying to, do textual criticism and see what they were talking about. I don't know, it lights a fire under my ass, so
That's
I've just
awesome.
been doing that for 25 years.
Well, I'm really grateful you had that trip when you were 18 because that sent you on a rabbit hole that led to 3 or 4 books. Yeah. And I love this LSD Wonder Child book.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I would love to get into like clarifying some of the more famous stories in psychedelics first in our conversation.
Sure.
Because I think you communicate so well about those subjects. And so one of the biggest ones is the Salem witch trials.
Yeah.
And there's a rumor going around that all those witches were they weren't possessed by the devil. They just took ergot or got a hold of some psychedelic, and that's what made them convulse and act possessed. And I'd love to get your take on, maybe we can say what happened in the Salem witch trials, what's the idea, and then what you think happened.
Yeah. So with the Salem witch trials, a very cold winter in 1692, where I believe it was 18 people ended up being executed for witchcraft on the accusations of a group of teenage girls, like spanning from around 12 to 18, 19 years old. I think that what was really going on, if not ergots, that actually sparked the original trial, like the initial bringing of these people to court, was just the imaginations of some very frustrated young girls. This is a highly patriarchal society. The young boys were told, shut up, get to work. The young girls were told, just shut up, and I feel like they were acting out. And the reason I don't think it had anything to do with ergot initially was that the symptoms that the girls showed only seemed to manifest when the guilty parties were in the room. Ergot doesn't work like that. Also, the girls showed no outward signs of ergotism, like gangrene. They weren't vomiting. They weren't having like, these like sweating profusely or anything. Ergot, I mean, when you suffer from ergotism, like if you're lucky enough to survive it, your limbs are still going to probably fall off. Like you're going to lose a hand or a leg or something. And that didn't happen either. Now, where I think there is a little something to the ergot hypothesis is that these trials went on for months. They began in January and went on for about 5 or 6 months. And I feel like during that time, we do actually have reports of people acting out that does sound very much like ergotism. So what I think might have happened was the imagination of these young girls sparked the trials, and then a few cases of ergotism totally unrelated to the trial occurred, and it just sort of gave credit to what the girls were saying. But ultimately, I don't think the trials were actually sparked by ergotism because there's just, again, no outward signs of it. And in fact, at one point, some of the elder girls started telling the younger ones, yo, you guys are going too far with this. Like, I'm out. I'm not going to pretend like I'm suffering, from witchcraft anymore. And again, ergotism doesn't work like that. You don't get to just bow out when you feel like the ruse, is up.
Yeah, I feel like the story is so interesting on so many levels because on one hand you have like this social contagion,
yes,
and that may have made people highly sensitive to seeing strange behavior. And if somebody did get a little whiff of that ergot, or maybe I should back up and like, how does that even affect somebody? Like, are they in a field and they just touch it, or
no? What would have happened is you'd like grind up, like you'd harvest your grain, and there just might be a little spur of ergot in there. And I mean, that's all it takes.
So they're just making bread or...
Yeah, they're just making bread or cereal of some kind. And there just happens to be a little bit of ergot contamination in there.
And so they have found ergot in that area, Massachusetts.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, anywhere, if you have a really harsh, rainy harvest season, I mean, you're going to get some ergot.
So it's a pretty simple theory. Like,
yeah. And again, I don't know that that's what sparked the Salem witchcraft trials, but again, it might have sort of pushed it along a few months down the road.
And then it just kind of ended.
Yeah,
a year later, it was just over.
Yeah, and then everyone's like, oh, yeah, I guess we shouldn't have killed those people.
Yeah, that story just captures the imagination because it involves like superstition and young girls, and I'm sure there's been like dozens of movies made about it.
Yeah.
It just captures the magic. It's something that just keeps living on in our conscious, and it's like, could something like that happen? Could people get possessed? Or
Arthur Miller's The Crucible. It's a good example.
I haven't heard. Is that a movie?
Yeah, it's Arthur Miller wrote a play about the Salem witch trials. But just to your point that we hear it in popular culture as well.
Yeah, it's funny. I often hear the Salem witch trials referred to by like a psychologist will use it to show evidence of a social contagion or like a mass psychosis.
Yeah.
Or a psychedelic historian might look at it from a psychedelics lens, or everybody in their field has a way of looking at the Salem witch trials from that lens that they specialize in.
Yeah, absolutely. We all have our own gestalt that we view the evidence through, and we do our best to not let our own personal biases creep into the data or the remnants of the records of what's left, because we all have our biases, of course. But so you want to just do your very best, and that's one of the things as a historian you're trained to do, is when you're writing something, it's like, wait a minute, does this sound way too much like how I would want it to be? And if it does, you have to rethink how you're looking at the evidence.
So when you're piecing this history together, you're really trying to remove any sort of bias, and you're just looking at the facts.
We're doing our best.
Which is really hard.
Yeah, and I would even go as far as to say it's nearly impossible. Because again, to your point, we all have our lenses that we're looking through this stuff. Now, what I try to do, like to counter that, is say, oh no, psychedelics actually weren't present here, like with the Salem witch trials. And again, it might have been a little bit a few months down the line, but like what I'm trying to do is say like, yeah, I'm a psychedelics guy and I'm going to try to give this to you, even if there isn't a psychedelic origin. I'm just trying to figure out what happened the best I can. Like a detective doesn't, one way or the other. It's like, I'm just trying to figure out who done it,
Yeah. So what kind of sources are you looking at?
Trial record sources, people wrote diaries, things like that. You mean like with the Salem witch trials or in general?
Um, that or in general.
Yeah, it would be
Yeah.
the, it's silly for me to say because it's essentially the same answer. You want to look for primary sources. You want to look for things written at the time that it happened. You want eyewitnesses, and you want multiple sources that corroborate each other, corroborate with each other, but we're not in cahoots with each other. Because if you have, let's say, 20 sources for an event, but the latter 19 were all copying the first guy, you don't have 20 sources, you have one.
Right. Right. Memory is a funny thing.
Exactly.
Yeah. Um, well, with this new modern technology, I do find it to be interesting that we have this like whole new field of archaeochemistry, or where people go into these ancient sites and they test things almost like a CSI scene, like our common friend Brian Marescu,
Yes. Yeah.
looking for the mystery at Eleusis. All this new modern ways of testing things has revealed a new story to us. So do you incorporate kind of like the chemistry, the biology, like these new forensic things into your...
I'm going to when I start writing, like, so back when I was writing my books, this stuff wasn't as prominent. But now as it's becoming more prominent, I totally will. Or I should say, in my most recent book, I cite Brian and when he's talking about the ergot that was potentially used at Catalonia. I mean, I'm on his side with that. I think the evidence is pretty solid for ergot use. We also have the Temple of Ergot, where the archaeochemists scraped. There were these two incense pillars. One of them tested positive for frankincense. The other one tested positive for cannabis. So,
was this the Oracle of Delphi?
no, the Oracle of Delphi was another thing.
Okay.
That's a Greek thing. This is an ancient Hebraic thing.
Okay.
And
Wow, I've never heard of it.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
Brian writes about it. I think it's in the concluding chapter. He sort of makes mention of the Temple of Ergot, where the archaeochemists like really, I mean, they've demonstrated that whatever rabbi was in that temple was absolutely getting high on cannabis. Now the other thing to say about that is that that person might have also been getting high on frankincense. The kind of frankincense that we know today that you'll smell in a church, that existed in the ancient world, but there were also other kinds of frankincense that had psychoactive effects. They were maybe over harvested or went extinct in some way, but we know that they existed from ancient sources like I believe Virgil and Galen both write about frankincense, that, these women or these priestesses, they'd inhale this frankincense and they'd go into this religious frenzy. And it's like, oh, okay, well, maybe the guys in Arad, well, they were mixing the cannabis with the frankincense, and damn, would I want to try that.
That's amazing, because there's so many things that alter our consciousness.
Yeah.
Like anything can. You could pinch yourself for 5 minutes and
Yeah.
your consciousness would be different.
Yeah.
One way that I like to joke about is how I alter my consciousness is whenever I go to a really hot, humid place, I get a bowl of like hot, spicy soup. And I just like that experience of like sweating and eating hot, spicy soup in a hot tropical place. It like cleanses you and it makes you kind of feel high. I don't know why,
I'm sure.
but it's not a conventional mind altering experience that you'd think of. But to me, I'm like, this is changing my consciousness for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, I mean, looking at history, it's really like, how hard is it to even know what we're taking if you don't have like that forensic evidence,
It's really difficult for a variety of reasons. One of those reasons is that in some cases you'll have ancient writers talking about substances in like ways that we would call psychedelic and calling it this name that we've never heard of. So Pliny writes of gelatophilus. He says that the Persian magi use gelatophilus. It puts them in this otherworldly state like a prophecy. Do you know what gelatophilus is? I have no idea what that is.
No.
We have other sources where the author will talk about something that we do know about, but we don't know about any psychedelic varieties. So an example would be Plutarch writes about this kind of ivy that the Maenads, who are the priestesses of Dionysus, they would somehow eat or whatever, absorb this ivy, ingest this ivy somehow, and they would have religious experiences with it. Plutarch uses the word enthusiasmos. We get the word entheogen from enthusiasmos.
Wow.
I mean, he's clearly describing, when you read the passage, he is clearly describing a psychedelic experience. He even says that it makes them drunk, but they're not drinking wine. But we don't know of any ivy today that will cause an entheogenic experience. So again, it's like, what was Plutarch talking about? Then we have other things like, what was his name? Polyaenus writes about Asterion, that the priestesses of Hera used. Now we didn't know what Asterion was, except for it was either Galen or Dioscorus in one of their medical works actually says, and some Greeks call cannabis Asterion. So now we actually know that they were using cannabis. But without that later so saying, I'm going to clear this up, we would have no idea what Asterion was. But we now know that it was cannabis.
That's so awesome. And this reminds me of Brian's book about how the ancients would call this Kukion beer.
Yeah.
But that beer could be very different from what we think of as beer today.
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I would even go as far as to say it was most probably very different from the kind of beer we have today.
And why was that?
Because, they didn't have modern method. Let's see. First, like all of our beer has to grant FDA approval. They didn't have that in the ancient world. So people would just make these really, strong beers, and then they would throw all these plant matter into it as well. So, as just one example, today, we have a Pilsner, right? A Pilsner kraut. Pilsner is the German word for henbane. Henbane is a highly psychoactive solanaceous plant that medieval wise women would put in their witches ointments to have these otherworldly experiences. So we don't put henbane in the Pilsner anymore, but we retained the name of a Pilsner from back when it used to have henbane in it.
That's really cool. Just studying the etymology, is that what it's called, of words? You can
exactly.
Kind of do your forensics that way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's another way to do the sort of forensic investigation is through linguistics and etymology. Awesome. Yeah.
So I guess the $1 million question is, what do you think that they were consuming at Eleusis?
Wow. Let's see. I think that the best case that can be made is actually for opium. I think that there is far more evidence for opium than there is for ergot at Eleusis. I would rather they were drinking ergot. I'm Greek. I would love to be able to say, my Grecian ancestors were taking this, primitive form of LSD. But the truth is, there really isn't much evidence at all for ergot at Eleusis. I love Brian's book. It's a great book. I think everybody should read it. But I felt like maybe he's saving like the really crunchy and juicy stuff for another book, but I didn't hear a good solid case for ergot at Eleusis. He made a great case for ergot at Catalonia, as I was saying earlier, and he makes an excellent, like one of the best cases for just psychedelic beers in general in the ancient world. But when we zoom in on Eleusis and look at what's been left behind, like the relics and the writing, opium is all over the place. You have carvings of Persephone rising from the dead that she's holding in her hands wheat stalks, snakes, and opium. You had the poet Theocritus saying that to the Greeks, Demeter, Persephone's mother, was always an opium goddess. There was actually a Christian who took part, don't quote me on this. I think it was Clement of Alexandria, but I'm not 100% sure. I don't quite remember. But he also said that opium was present in the rites. And then we have these large reliefs that show opium flowers, wheat, and what looks like a mixing vat. And so I'm not saying that opium was in the kaikion, or as Brian would say, the kukion. I'm not saying it was, but I am saying that if something was in the kukion, like an entheogen of some kind, you can make a much better case for opium than you can for ergot, at least based on what's left to us. I could be totally wrong about this. There could be a smoking gun waiting somewhere in the ruins of the Telesterion, in Athens, like, there's the ergot. And then I will be the first person screaming it from every rooftop from sea to shining sea. They were using ergot at Eleusis. Brian was right. Brian was right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great attitude that, you don't identify with any one of these theories. Like, if you're shown new evidence, you change your beliefs. I think that's what science is all about.
Yeah.
I think we want to believe that they were doing something at Eleusis that we associate with like enlightenment, because that place is associated with greatest thinkers like Aristotle, Plato,
Yeah.
even Marcus Aurelius. Romans came as tourists and did that initiation, and they supposedly came out these much more enlightened people. They died before they died.
Yeah. So that
And
they wouldn't die when they died.
correct. And so I guess when you say it's opium, I'm like, I never thought of opium as being this enlightening tool. I've never done it. Could it do that?
So I think that within the right ritualistic context, yes, it can. One of the things about sort of the plant medicines of the ancient world, they didn't have access to peyote or ayahuasca or anything like that. But what they did have was a lot of cannabis, opium, mandrake, and henbane. And when you mix those plant medicines with deep ritual or magical work, I mean, I do it all the time, you can absolutely have an entheogenic experience with them. And to your point about the ancient Greeks, like, that's sort of the whole, it gets murky because like today we have like an opioid crisis, right? So of course the ancient Greeks wouldn't use opium because look at all the problems it's causing today. Oh, no. Different time, different place, different society. I mean, the ancient Greeks didn't even have a word for drug addict or alcoholic. They didn't have words for that. So we sort of, what we do sometimes, and that's what historians train to do, it's called an anachronism, when we throw a modern idea onto the past.
Which happens a lot.
Yeah, and we all do that. Everybody does that. And with Ergot, it could be that what we're doing is throwing our modern desires, say, well, LSD can be so enlightening. Obviously it is, for me, for you, for the kinds of people we hang out with, LSD is really enlightening. So of course the ancient Greeks must have been doing that, but you have to take each culture in its own time and place. And our modern rules seldom apply when we're talking about the ancient world. And the short of it is, yes, the ancient Greeks absolutely could have found enlightenment through opium. And I say that because we know that the Minoans were, because we have a little statuette of this goddess. It was an opium goddess, and it was found next to this vase in this cave in Gazi in Crete, the island of Crete. And this vase they found was actually used for ingesting opium in some way. So you have this opium statue with this goddess. You have this way of it imbibing opium somehow. And those people were probably having what we would call an entheogenic experience. And it's that practice that I believe, and I can't be sure, made its way north to Athens and became the rites of Eleusis. So we know that at least the Minoans could find enlightenment through opium and ritual. So if they could, why not the Greeks? And I mean, the Egyptians did as well. So, they would, you go to a healing temple and you would take, an opium drink or something and have a vision of Isis healing you. That all to me, it's medicinal, but it's entheogenic. And in the ancient world, magic, medicine, religion, it was all the same thing. We separate them today, but in the ancient world, it was all the same.
That's a great point. You said a lot of things there that like shot off light bulbs in my mind, but it's not necessarily the substance that is good or bad. It's kind of how we use it. And so like opium has a very bad rap right now, rightfully so.
Sure.
But, maybe in the past it was used for enlightenment, similar to what we talked about in your book, The LSD Wonder Child. We think of LSD as this great enlightening tool, but clearly during MK Ultra, it was used to traumatize and torture people.
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. It's as Stanislav Grof says, they're non-specific amplifiers. So if you're amplifying a spiritual or religious experience and you're taking the substantia, like that's what you're going to amplify. Whereas with MK Ultra, they were doing some pretty nasty stuff. So they were just amplifying trauma, pain, all the bad stuff.
Yeah, I loved how you went into MK Ultra because I didn't know how. I think that might be the darkest thing I've ever covered on my channel. Like I just rewatched our video we did together, and if people haven't watched it, it'd be great to watch after this or before. But man, that was really dark.
Yeah,
that was like one of the darkest chapters in American history, I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, they were torturing children. Giving 9, 10, 11-year-old girls LSD and teaching them how to like assassinate like enemies, like foreign leaders and stuff. It's like, I can't imagine the trauma.
And did it work at all though?
No.
It didn't work. So
No.
has MK Ultra been dropped? as far
far
as
as
we
we
know.
know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
far as we know, but I mean, our government, the
Yeah.
shadowy stuff that goes on, who knows?
I mean, is there anything that you've come across in your research that indicates that there is some sort of substance that you could give somebody and then trigger them later, like blast off a frequency and then they just follow some order? Or I don't know, you can condition somebody through a substance, anything like that?
None that I'm aware of. I'm
Okay.
not saying that there isn't one,
That's good.
but I don't know of any that works that way.
That's a relief.
Yeah, I hope not.
Yeah, I mean, as far as we know, MK Ultra was shut down, and
Yeah. So
as far as we know,
Yeah.
yeah. All right, well, that was a great start. We covered Eleusinian mysteries and Salem witch trials, and I thought we'd cover a couple other like really popular myths or stories about psychedelics, and
Let's do it.
one of the biggest ones is stoned ape.
Stoned ape. Yeah.
So stoned ape is this idea that the use of psychedelics, mushrooms, rapidly increased human evolution and kind of is what separates us from the rest of the animals.
Yeah.
In a nutshell. Paul Stamets and Terrence McKenna do great jobs of describing this theory, but I'd love to get your take on if there's any truth to that.
Sure. I don't know. Again, this would veer straight into evolutionary biology, of which I don't know anything. I would say that if we were to take the stoned ape theory and push it 100,000 so years into the future, I think that you can actually see a stoned ape theory when it comes to art and culture. So, for example, the famous bee shaman in the Tassili caves in Algeria. If you're familiar with that, it's like the shaman is like wearing this bee mask, holding the mushrooms.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that you can see it there. I think you could see it with I was talking about that ancient Minoan rite with the opium goddess and carving the statues, like, and actually like putting opium, like she's wearing a crown that has 3 opium bulbs on it, and it's clear as day that that's what they are. And I think within the rites of Eleusis you can see it. I think that also with some of the other myths, like in Egypt, the myth of Hathor, and how the sun god Ra had decided to kill all of humanity, and he sent Hathor to do it, and so she's slaughtering everybody, and then she gets tired and goes to sleep, and Ra goes, "Oh, geez, maybe I shouldn't have started slaughtering everybody, because who's going to be around to worship me?"
Yeah.
So he orders some Mandrake beer to be produced on the island of Elephantine, which is on the Nile River. It's where they would produce the Mandrake beer. And for those who don't know, Mandrake, again, is a highly psychoactive plant that can be used entheogenically. I do it all the time. Wise women were putting it in their witches' ointments. And, excuse me. And so the people that were still alive, they dumped the Mandrake beer into the blood of their fallen comrades that was in the streets. And when Hathor woke up, she was ever so bloodthirsty, so she started to lap it up, and then ended up getting really high, and it sort of mellowed her harsh, so to speak. And every year, the people of Egypt, or in this small part of Egypt, they would celebrate with this Feast of Hathor, where they would all drink Mandrake beer and have this, this wild community entheogenic experience, essentially honoring the plant medicine that saved humanity. And again, I think that you could see the stoned ape theory there. I think that like in these early myths, in these early carvings, these religious devotions, I think that's where you could see the stoned ape theory. But I'm also a mere historian, not an evolutionary biologist. So it's totally possible that, the classic stoned ape theory has some weight to it, but I wouldn't know one way or the other. And I would just be spouting ignorance if I tried.
I've never heard those myths, especially the myth of Hathor. And I also really haven't heard of Mandrake before.
Oh, yeah.
Like what exactly is that?
So Mandrake is a solanaceous plant. It is very, very difficult to grow. It's one of the few entheogenic plants that appears in the Old Testament. It appears twice in the Song of Solomon and in the story of Leah and Rachel. And cannabis is the other entheogen that appears in the Old Testament. And in low doses, it'll sort of give you this very kind of loose, sort of, you had one strong beer kind of feeling. In higher doses, you're going to start having like light trails, like like when the mushrooms are first coming on, you go like this and you could see the trails. And then in even higher doses, I mean, you're full on having visions, and then go a little bit higher than that and you are dead, because it is a very, very, very toxic plant. So I recommend to all your listeners, don't mess with Mandrake. Stick with the safe illegal substances instead, because Mandrake is totally legal. But it is dangerous. In fact, the first time I ever ingested Mandrake, I made a suffumigation of Mandrake, henbane, and cannabis, and I pretty much lost my mind. My roommate and the singer of my old band, we lived together, and she found me in my room. I don't even remember this, but I was sweating profusely, naked, just scratching at my body in the corner. And so she and her fiance at the time, who was a good friend of mine, I mean, they helped me into bed and they tended to me and nursed me back to, just being a living human being again. Now these days I can take a dose, because I've been working with, this was in 2005. I've been working with Mandrake since then. So I can take a dose of Mandrake that'll kill a person, but I'll have an entheogenic experience with it.
Jeez, please be careful.
Yes,
yeah,
no, I am.
That sounds really.
I'm very careful.
I mean, you heard it here, people.
Yeah.
Stick to illegal substances.
Yeah, stick to the safe illegal stuff. Yeah, don't go with the unsafe legal stuff.
I guess that's probably a good lesson, though. If something is like so new that it's still legal, or so kind of unknown that it's legal, probably a sign to be really careful with it.
Yeah. Yeah, just be careful. And I mean, it doesn't matter what you're taking. If you're doing some soul exploration or mind exploration, just always be very, very careful.
Yeah, and you also mentioned another substance that I really haven't heard of, henbane. I think I've heard of it, but I don't know what it is.
Yeah, so henbane, it has very similar effects to Mandrake. It's essentially like these solanaceous plants are cousins of the potato family, or I think tomato as well. And yeah, they just they're technically classified as deliriants. But again, when I'm working with them, it's way more entheogenic than it is deliriant. I think that what we label these things has more to do with the experience than the chemical makeup, because that's what Humphrey Osmond, the guy who coined the word psychedelic, that's what he had in mind. Today, people tend to look at, especially like the neuroscientists of psychedelia, they look at, things like, they call it the classic psychedelic substances. So they'll say things like mescaline, mushrooms, LSD, ayahuasca, anything that interacts with the 5-HT2A receptors in the brain. But that's not what Humphrey Osmond was thinking about. He was talking about a specific experience. So based on his original definition, something like cannabis, which doesn't interact with the 5-HT2A receptors, he would have still called psychedelic, and quite frankly, so do I. I think that you can absolutely have a psychedelic experience on, especially like a high dose of really good hash, doing ritual work, magical work, casting circles. I do it all the time.
Yeah, and I've heard that you don't even really need a plant or a fungus to get to these states. I mean, some people talk about breathing exercises.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can. I'm skeptical that I could do a breathing exercise that would get me to where like ayahuasca gets me, or 5-MeO-DMT. I definitely, because I meditate every day, I can absolutely, I agree that you could get to some really cool, what could be considered maybe low psychedelic places, but perhaps a far more experienced meditator, like somebody that's been doing it their whole life, maybe that person can absolutely get there. But I also feel like the idea of using a substance to get to that place and oh no, that's bad, it's not natural, that is a modern Christian precept that has not existed for essentially all of human history. Nobody in the ancient medieval world would look at somebody taking a plant medicine for a spiritual experience and be like, oh, that's a shortcut, that's cheap. No, that's a Christian framework that we're sort of operating under. But nobody in the past ever thought that. It's well, when you're building a fire, do you rub two sticks together or do you use a lighter? Yeah, you use a lighter. Oh, well, you're cheating. No, you're not. You're using the technology that's available to get the job done. That's
a good point. And we've arrived neatly to Christianity.
Yes.
Yes. And we've put it off for long enough now.
Yes.
So another huge theory is this Sacred Mushroom and the Cross, written in 1970 by this John Marco Allegro. And I haven't read this book, but I've heard the theory talked about a lot, that Christianity is just this misunderstood, and it's really this fertility cult that was all centered around the Amanita muscaria mushroom, and that Jesus is perhaps a mushroom himself, and it's all a metaphor.
Yeah.
What do you think about that theory?
So I'm going to speak from somebody who used to absolutely believe that theory.
Maybe you can articulate the theory better than I can.
Oh,
I don't
no,
know
I think you kind of nailed it.
Did I? Okay.
Yeah, you totally nailed it. Yeah, that I couldn't have said it better.
Okay,
I mean,
right on.
That's it. You
Yeah.
know? There's then I would just add, there's the sort of the offshoot theory of the mushroom in Christian art now as well. And it sort of went in that direction, and we could get into that or not. So I used to actually believe the sacred mushroom and the cross, like the whole theory. And one of the first books I was going to write was on the holy mushroom. I read, all the books on, well, not all of them, but the majority of them. And I didn't feel like any of the authors had actually made a really good case for it. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to set out to demonstrate that this is true. And the more I tried to show it was true, the more I was like, wow, there's nothing to this at all. And it was actually very disheartening because I loved that theory. But there were too many issues with it. There's problems of textual transmission. Like Allegro thought that people were, they were coding these secret mushroom messages into the words of the New Testament. And textual transmission in the ancient world, like you couldn't just go to a bookstore and buy a book. I mean, they had to be copied out painstakingly by hand. And when you do that, you're going to make mistakes. Everyone will make mistakes if you're trying to copy something out by hand. And that's just not a very sufficient way to encode a message. On top of which, most people there was wide illiteracy at the time. And a lot of the sort of compound words that Allegro was using to prove his point, he just made them up. Like, well, if you have to make up the word, like if there's no actual precedent in the Sumerian language or in the ancient Hebraic language or in any ancient Semitic language, what are you talking about? Like, okay, I just made up the word, I don't know, whatever, peluche. And that means that the ancient people believe that Tom Hatsis is right about everything he says. It's like, well, is there any ancient word bullshit? No, I just made it up. So,
So why did this idea get so popular in the first place?
Because it's sexy. It's an awesome, like, I mean, how intriguing is that Jesus was really like a metaphor for magic mushroom usage.
And so it's like you eat his body and
yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. And this has been carried out in secret by this cabal of, occult priests who have, covered up for all these centuries. Dude, it's essentially the Da Vinci Code, and you add a psychedelic to it. I mean, it's awesome. Like, I love it.
Yeah.
I have so much fun with it. Like, I love reading those books. I don't buy it, but I loved John Marco Allegro's book. I loved The Sacred Mushroom. I read it like, I don't know, 5.5 times because it's so deep in etymology that, like, I mean, I couldn't understand it on the first read. In fact, I couldn't understand it on the second or the third read either. But I eventually got it. I got what he was saying. And there's just, unfortunately, there's nothing to it. And if there were something to it, just like Ergot et Eleusis, I would be the first person standing on every rooftop of the Bullhorn saying, Jesus was really a magic mushroom, But I can't just skew evidence to make myself sound right. I can't do it.
But John Marco Allegro could.
I guess so. I mean, he was brilliant. And I think that sometimes people with his level of brilliance, it's like they're so smart that they can't conceive that they could be wrong about anything. He was absolutely brilliant. I mean, there was a reason he was tapped to be one of the scholars of the Dead Sea Scrolls. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, he was actually the youngest person. Everybody else was, long in the tooth. And he was young because he was that good. And his first few books on the Dead Sea Scrolls, they were bestsellers. I mean, he was celebrated as this like renowned Dead Sea Scrolls scholar. And he just sort of, I don't know, I think that he got he was upset. I don't want to psychoanalyze him because I never met him and he's dead, but it's possible that he just got really upset with what he was finding in the sources and the slowness with which the translators were allowed to release their findings. And I think it's possible that he just wanted to stick it to, the team that he was working with and the church as well. And this was just his last, you can't fire me, I quit, F you, I'm out kind of thing. But I don't ultimately know what would cause a person to tank their career like that.
Yeah, because coming out with this theory is most certainly going to tank his career.
It did.
Even if it's true, it's going to tank your career.
Yeah, that's the thing. And if he could have demonstrated it was true, and if he could have shown that his detractors were totally wrong, you're right. It still probably could have hurt his career anyway. But he wasn't able to do that. And his detractors were able to show how he was incorrect. So it's a shame because I love it as a concept, but we have to go again with what probably happened in the past. So is it probable Jesus was a metaphor for the magic mushroom? Of course. We're talking about 2,000 years ago. It's possible or probable, but is it more probable that Allegro was wrong? Yeah, that's more probable.
Yeah, I think that's Occam's razor. I believe that's the principle. The simplest story is often the most true.
Yeah. The simple choice is usually
if you have to contort all these things to make this secret cabal of conspiracies fit together, then I don't know. Yeah. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
Oh, Christopher Hitchens, exactly. Yeah.
So it certainly is one of those exciting theories that gets your dopamine levels firing off, I guess.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of people on the internet today. This is kind of a side note that they have a little bit of evidence, but then they have this extraordinary claim based off of that little bit of evidence, and it gets tons of attention. But maybe years later, we come out, somebody does all the thinking and research and says this is so wrong. But by that time, the attention has kind of moved on.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and especially in the age of the internet and the way social media works, it's like we're all doing it for the likes and reactions. So if you see something scandalous like Jesus was a magic mushroom, I mean, you're going to share that, on Instagram or Facebook or whatever it is. And then, if you found it intriguing, and it is intriguing, well, other people are going to find it intriguing too, and they're going to share it as well. And then, before you know it, I'm saying like, hey, what's the evidence? And everyone is telling me to shut up. I don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Is there any insane psychedelic story that has happened in human history that you do think is true?
An insane one that I think is true.
Just over the top sensational.
I don't know. Let's see. Over the top sensational.
I guess it wouldn't be insane if you think it's true.
Yeah. Nothing in this moment comes to mind, but if I think of something, I'll get back. Let's see. Hold on a second. Something
because we've been kind of debunking certain things.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of one that's like oh my god, and like it actually is true. I mean, I think the Witches Ointments were true. I think that there's something to say about that. I wrote my first book was on the Witches Ointment.
So yeah, I didn't read that first book. What was the Witches? What's the idea there?
So it was this ointment that wise women would use to have what we would call entheogenic experiences. And the ointment was made out of things like henbane, mandrake that we've discussed, opium as well, datura sometimes. And they would have visions of flying to these mountaintops to celebrate this goddess and, dance with all these supernatural creatures like elves and giants and heroes of myth. And when you read like what some of the theologians were saying about this practice, you're like, oh, this is an entheogenic experience. Like the word didn't exist yet, but that's what this guy's describing. I mean, this one, the bishop of Avila, Spain, a guy named Alonso Tostado, literally says, we know of certain women that we theologians call witches that use medical drugs to imagine that they're flying off to these distant places and having all this revelry and, worshiping the gods of old. Actually, he doesn't say in that one, worshiping the gods of old, but, he's clearly describing an entheogenic experience, even though the word didn't exist at the time.
Interesting. Yeah, I've never heard of that. Witches Ointment. That sounds like quite a topic.
Yeah. It's I spent 10 years on that. Wow. I had to teach myself Latin in order to do the research because it got to a point where all the secondary sources were pointing to sources that they were in Latin, they were in archaic German, Old Spanish, Italian, all this stuff. And I didn't read Latin, so I had to interrupt my research, teach myself a workable form of Latin, and then get back to the research.
Wow. Good for you. I mean, it certainly shows. Like when you speak on this stuff, it clearly shows that you know what you're talking about. So
I'm doing my best. I get things wrong though sometimes. I want to be clear.
I mean, we all do.
Wrong. Yeah.
Don't we all? Another thing that popped in my mind was I've heard rumors that before wars in ancient times, people would consume certain things and just get into this like insane state. Maybe the Vikings, or have you ever heard of stuff like that?
Yeah, that's the berserker theory. So that's something else I've looked into. There doesn't seem to be anything to go on. Essentially, all of that goes back to an article written by a guy named Samuel Udman in the late 1700s. I don't remember the exact year. I apologize. And he essentially just speculated that, oh, well, what made these berserker warriors so insane? And he said, oh, well, they must have been, on some kind of drug. And essentially his reasoning boiled down to this. He's like, well, they didn't have cannabis in Scandinavia. By the way, they did. We know that they did through archaeological research. He said, well, they didn't have opium. We actually know that they did. He said, well, what did they have? Oh, well, they had this Amanita muscaria mushroom. That must be it. And it's like, well, wait a minute. That's it. That can't, you have to show us evidence. Yeah, that's just correlation equaling causation. Just because Amanita muscaria grows there doesn't mean the people were eating it. And it certainly doesn't mean they were eating it before they went into battle. I eat Amanita muscaria all the time.
Oh, wow.
Not a good idea to take before battle. Yeah. You don't want to take Amanita muscaria before battle. Where we can see where I think the Amanita muscaria was actually used in warfare, goes back to this ancient Grecian general named Crisemi. I happen to name my kitty cat after Crisemi. She was a priestess of the mysteries of Hecate. Hecate was a goddess of plant medicines. And there was a king Nopus, the king of Athens, and he went to see an oracle, and the oracle said to him, he went to go see her about an upcoming battle. I should probably say why he saw the oracle, about this upcoming battle. And the oracle said, unless you put a woman priestess as your general, you're going to be slaughtered. So Nopus was like, find me a priestess. And they went to this temple of Hecate, found this woman Crisemi, and put her as the general of the army. So what she did was, she walks out onto the battlefield. She has the troops set up an altar on the battlefield and bring a bull out to slaughter in the name of the Athenian gods for victory in war. Now, what the enemy didn't know was she had fed this bull some kind of psychoactive substance. I think it was the Amanita muscaria, and I'll say why I think it was the Amanita muscaria in a second. But what happened was, so she brought the bull out as it was going crazy from whatever substance she had given to it, and it ended up breaking free and running to the enemy camp. And so the enemy caught it and they slaughtered it, sacrificed it to their gods. And well, when you sacrifice an animal to your gods, you share in that meal, a communal meal with your people and the gods. It's a communal feast, which is exactly what Crisemi wanted them to do, because they started, whatever she fed that bull transferred from the bull to the soldiers. And then when she saw them running around losing their minds, she had said to her troops, slaughter them all. So they ran into the camp and killed everybody. The reason I think it was the Amanita muscaria is that we don't know of any other substance that will transfer through the digestive system and still be viable. We know that reindeer, right in Siberia, they'll eat the Amanita muscaria, and people will, when they pee, the people will get the snow, the pea snow, and they'll eat it so that they can also have the experience, the Amanita experience. So that's why I think it was the Amanita muscaria, because I could be wrong, but I don't know of any other substance that if I were to take it and then you killed and ate me, that you would also feel the effects. If I smoked a bowl and you ate me, you wouldn't get high, but Amanita, you would.
That is an amazing story.
Yeah, is that cool?
Is that a myth or is that history?
I think it's history. It could very well be a myth. We only have one source for it from the ancient world, but we don't. And it's actually from a strategic war book. It's called Stratagem. And so this guy who was writing it was like literally saying, hey, here's some shit, like, if your enemy, if you think you're outnumbered, just drug them, you know, like, because that'll work.
That is crazy. And I'm wondering, like, is Amanita muscaria that strong that you could give it to a bull and their meat would get people high? Like, that
And
seems...
high enough dose. I know, and that's the thing. Like,
Yeah.
it could be just like maybe, again, I don't know how the digestive tracts of bulls work, but it also could have been in its urine, and maybe some urine got on. But yeah, enough Amanita muscaria. I mean, it should do the trick.
That bull must have been really high.
Yeah, I mean, again, they do it in Siberia with reindeer all the time. So,
Yes, and that's
you know.
another thing I really wanted to talk to you about is the Christmas myths.
Sure.
The traditions surrounding Christmas. There's a lot of art that's got Amanita muscaria in it. That's Christmas art.
Mm-hmm.
And I did a whole video on this because I thought the connections were there were so many that it couldn't be just a coincidence that there's these myths in Siberia that the shaman would come around on like the winter solstice dressed in red with a bag of Amanita muscaria, and he would drop dried Amanita muscaria down their smoke hole, their chimneys on that day, kind of like Santa Claus dropping presents down the Christmas tree. And then these mushrooms are always associated with trees because they grow at the base of, at the root of pine trees, which is kind of where we get the idea of you cut the tree down, you bring it in home, and then you put red presents at the base. There's just so many like ornaments, hanging the mushrooms on the trees to dry, the reindeer, flying reindeer, you're high. I don't know. Are there any others, like all these weird coincidences?
Yeah, the stockings hung by the chimney with care was they would dry the mushrooms in the stockings. I think the red and white of Santa's costume, you know, was like the red and white of the Amanita. But I think you nailed all of them.
Okay, yeah. I mean, there's so many Christmas traditions where you're kind of like, this doesn't make any sense. Why do we bring a tree inside? Why do we hang a stocking over the, you know?
Yeah, that goes back to, so bringing a tree inside goes back to medieval times, and it was oh no, I can't remember her name. It starts with a B. It was some saint that starts with a B, and I can't recall. And I apologize
All right,
to your listeners. But so what it was the tradition began, and it had actually nothing to do with Christmas at all. Like bringing the tree into the house, that wasn't a Christmas thing.
Yeah.
It was the saint bee person thing, where what you were doing was you were taking a tree inside to nurse it back to life for the new year. That's where it began. I looked very deep into the Santa Claus Amanita thing. I might be writing a whole book about it, actually. I haven't decided yet. But the thing is, when you actually get in and look at all the sort of the building blocks of how these really odd traditions came about, it's difficult to find an Amanita muscaria anywhere. And believe me, come the holiday season, I love the Amanita Christmas theme. Like my house is going to be all Amanita muscaria, Santa Claus holding mushrooms. Like that's because I love the aesthetic of it. But I mean, we can go point by point if you'd like, as far as, you know, where like bringing the trees in, presents under the tree, the red and white of the costume, and sort of go over how those things actually unfolded culturally, if you'd like.
Yeah, because I'm kind of a lean towards, maybe those did come from Amanita muscaria. So I'd love to hear like
Sure.
where they really came from, or
Well, which one do you want to start with?
so we've addressed the Christmas tree. Maybe Santa Claus and presents down the chimney.
Sure.
Yeah.
So the idea of Siberian shamans handing out, Amanita muscaria to people is a Western construct. Sort of like getting back to Edward Said's Orientalism, like where we construct these sort of exotic cultures. Very few shamans in Siberia actually work with the Amanita muscaria. Very few of them. Most people in Siberia use the Amanita muscaria for recreation. The few shamans that do work with Amanita muscaria do not give it to people. They take it themselves. The idea is that like I'm, let's say, feeling sick, right? And Mark, you're the Siberian shaman. I come to you and say, oh, my head's hurting and I keep vomiting and, I'm getting these dizzy spells. You're not going to give me the Amanita muscaria. You are going to take the Amanita muscaria, enter the spirit world and ask the spirits how to heal me. And then you're going to heal me without giving me the mushroom at all. That's how it's done over there. They don't give the mushrooms out to people, and they're definitely not dropping them down, or at least I don't know. And I've read a lot of travelers' reports that describe this, like all the early ones and some modern ones, and nobody talks about that at all. They all talk about the shaman takes the mushroom, and then divines a cure for the person.
That does make a lot of sense, because the Amanita muscaria, I don't know if you would be giving that out.
I mean, I give mine out to my friends all the time,
Yeah.
but my friends are also like deep, they're veteran psychonauts, so they know what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, the Amanita muscaria is very famous, but it seems like one that a lot of people are very hesitant to do, because I've heard the trip is not that fun.
Yeah, we've had like half a century of propaganda about that poor mushroom. I would say this, that if you go in for like a breakthrough dose or a deep dose the first time, yeah, you're going to get sick. You're not going to die or anything, but you're going to probably get very sick, throw up, nausea, sweating profusely, all the rest of it. But how I did it was I started off very slowly. I formed a relationship with the mushroom. So before I'd go out foraging them, and before I even ate a single one of them, when I would do my morning meditation, I would just sit with my jar in my lap and meditate with my Amanita muscaria. I would then, if I was writing a song or playing a song, like I would sing and play my guitar to my Amanita muscaria like they were the audience. But I didn't eat them. And then after a while, the mushroom tells you, it'll say, okay, it's time for a little bit. It's time to introduce, into the body. And so I just started off with little tablespoons, or a teaspoon, then to a tablespoon. And now, I mean, I take about 8 grams before I go to bed at night.
Wow.
Yeah,
Every night?
almost every night. I would say about 3 to 4 times a week.
Amanita muscaria.
Yeah.
Wow. I got to know more about this.
Yeah.
Do you like boil it or anything?
Make it into a tea. Now, although I've stopped doing that so I started off eating it, and then everyone said that the tea was stronger. I find eating it to be way stronger, at least for how my body reacts to it. And so I eat it raw again. But for months, actually almost a year now, I was making it into a tea. And I do it for a lot of dream divination. I mean, the lucid and vivid dreams that you will have on Amanita muscaria are the best.
Really?
They're the best. Yeah, it's like entering another shamanic world. I mean, it really is. It's phenomenal. I recommend the Amanita muscaria to pretty much anybody, especially if, like, I also suffer from sleep apnea, and that's one of the reasons I use it both medicinally and spiritually. Because it keeps me asleep and I actually get a good night's sleep. But yeah, definitely start off very slowly, introduce it to your body, form a relationship with it first, read a poem to it, just hang out with it first and open up that line of communication. And here's where my woo-woo comes out. I believe that all of these plant medicines, sorry, roller derby, my arm clicks a lot.
Oh, no worries.
I believe that all of these sacred medicines do have a spirit to them. And so I find that when you honor that spirit and you listen to that spirit, it works with you. It doesn't work against you. Always be careful, start slow, especially with the Amanita muscaria, you honor it by starting slowly. It is not like psilocybin. Like, you can't just take like an eighth of it and have a breakthrough experience. Like, if you try again, and just the listeners, just start slowly. Don't go for a high dose. Again, like I said, I do 8 to 10 grams like before bed. That's after consuming Amanita muscaria in much smaller doses for like 5 years, or 6 years or something like that.
Wow.
So
yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying there. It reminds me of like food almost. Like, a lot of our food we have no relationship to where the food came from. The only thing we know about the food is the price.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the only information we have. But it's very different if you like were to forage your food or hunt your food. Mm-hmm. It's a very spiritual connection you have with that thing, and you don't feel like watching TV and kind of zoning out while you eat it. You feel like really intention.
Yeah.
And you're very present with that thing. So
yeah,
I agree. Like, if you are going to do mushrooms, you want to approach it in a very conscious way, and like all mushrooms. Yeah. You don't want to just meet some guy in the Jack in the Box parking lot and grab a bag of who knows what.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah.
So
Because I've done that, and you don't want to do that.
yeah, because you don't have a relationship with it. It's meant to be, if you're seeking some sort of spiritual, deep experience, you should approach it with consciousness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And or you could also just, that guy in the parking lot might be ripping you off. And
True.
that's what happened to me. I was actually, this is in 1999. I was at a System of a Down show at Irving Plaza. It was either Irving Plaza or the Roseland in Manhattan. And some guy, he had a sandwich bag. He's like, yo, you want mushrooms? I'm like, hell yeah, I do. He's like, all right, quick, $20. I give him the 20, gives me the bag. I mean, they were culinary mushrooms that you get from the supermarket.
Well, that's best case scenario.
Yeah, right.
Know?
So,
Yeah.
I mean, I just like, all right, well, I guess I'm going to have some mushrooms tonight with my dinner, but I'm now going to have a psychedelic experience with these. So, yeah, there's also like, if once you start foraging Amanita muscaria, it becomes very difficult to not be addicted to foraging Amanita. Like it's like you're gonna want to go out every day. My business partner and I mean, like when the rainy season comes, like we go to the Oregon coast all the time, which is 2.5 hours away from Portland. And I mean, we'll drive 4 or 5 days in a row going out. I mean, we come home with pounds of Amanita. And yeah.
I totally feel you, because I do that myself. I don't eat Amanita muscaria, but there's something about seeing them in the forest. It's so magical.
It is the primitive giddiness. That's what my business partner and I call it. You get that primitive giddiness, like what our ancestors must have felt when they found an Amanita muscaria. That there's one.
Yeah, I think the first time I saw one, I was hiking alone and it was raining pretty hard, and I was just like, you know what? I'm just gonna go out in the rain and walk around. Nobody else will be out. And I'm walking and I see something that looks like a piece of garbage. I thought it was like a Doritos bag or something. And I see it from far away, and I don't know why I walked up to it. And it just, the whole forest was like kind of faded, muted colors. And here's this thing that is just so bright and so big, and it doesn't even look natural. And it just bewildered me. And I told all my friends, you got to come check this out. And then, you find one and then you find more, and they're all in a line, and it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah. If you know, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to experience it.
And the other great thing about the Amanita muscaria is that there are no deadly lookalikes. Like, again, going back to the Oregon coast, Psilocybe azarescens grows there, which is the strongest psilocybin mushroom that we know about. But it looks very, very, very similar to the deadly Gallerina. With Amanita muscaria, there's no, I mean, we got one here. I mean, it either looks like that or it doesn't.
Yeah.
Or you don't have an Amanita muscaria.
Yeah. So as far as foraging goes, do you have any advice for people that want to get into foraging?
Oh, yeah. A lot of advice. One is, first and foremost, just get out there and start foraging. Second, I'd say that, and you don't have to follow, no one has to follow any of these protocols, but when I go out with friends, we'll clean up the area where we're foraging. Like, we bring garbage bags, and so we clean up the area first. We clean the land first. I'll always say a prayer to the land as well, thanking the goddess for bestowing the mushrooms, and then we go get them.
Nice.
My best advice would be bring some really good friends and a couple of joints and have a really awesome time foraging with your friends.
And do you always eat them?
Yeah.
And you're never worried that you misidentified anything, or
Not an Amanita muscaria. No. Others, I mean, that's another thing. If you're ever worried about a misidentification, do not eat that mushroom.
Correct.
Like, absolutely don't do it. It's not worth it. But again, with Amanita muscaria, it's very, very difficult to mistake,
Correct.
an Amanita muscaria for anything else. So yeah, I eat them all the time. I love them.
Yeah. I heard there's like a principle. You got to know the ones that you can definitely eat, and then know the ones that can definitely kill you.
Yep.
And then everything else you just appreciate. You don't pick it. You just kind of take a picture of it, or
Yep.
But
Say
yeah,
hi.
there's the really famous ones like morels and chanterelles and
Yeah.
porcinis. Those are like, everybody's foraging for those now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have a chanterelle spot as well. The chanterelles and lobster mushrooms and coral mushrooms
You got
go
to keep
there.
it a secret.
What's that?
You got to keep it
Oh
a secret.
yeah, I don't.
Yeah.
No forager ever
Yeah.
tells where their spots are.
I once found a big line of matsutakis,
Really?
and these are worth a lot of money apparently.
Yeah.
And the second I found it, there were other foragers in the forest, and I kind of, you look around and you make sure,
Yeah.
and then you start to dig, and then you go back. But yeah, it's getting to be a really popular hobby.
Yeah.
So,
It's a great way to get outdoors. I mean, it's awesome. I love foraging. I think everybody should do it. It's such a great way to connect to the earth. You also connect with yourself a lot more. You connect with your friends if you go out with your friends, and I don't know, like that's all sounds really like a good time to me.
I wonder if Easter egg hunting came from foraging at all, because
I have no idea.
It feels like an Easter egg hunt.
Yeah, right. It does feel
Yeah.
like an Easter egg hunt.
Yeah.
That might be something I tackle in the future, like where the Easter traditions come from, but I don't know.
Okay, great. I mean, I think we went through some of the most famous psychedelic history changing events. Are there any other ones that we missed?
I mean, the biggest change, the psychedelic moment that changed like the course of human history, I would say the biggest one was Huffman discovering LSD or synthesizing LSD. That more than anything else changed the world, I think.
Yeah, because the 60s were different.
Yeah, the 60s,
Yeah.
as we know them, would not have happened without LSD. We wouldn't have Sergeant Pepper, like
Yeah.
which would be no. I love Sergeant Pepper. I don't know if also the anti-war movements would have been as strong. The pro speech movements would have been as strong. I think a lot of these kids, I mean, they were doing the Lord's work. They took LSD and they're like, whoa, like we're just killing people in Vietnam. What, dude? No, And I think that really, not to say that, the anti-war movement existed before and without LSD, of course. What I'm saying is that I think that it got more people on board with it. I think that people were having these beautiful unifying, we are all one experiences. And it's like, well, how do you have that experience and we're slaughtering peasants in Vietnam for what? Over nothing? What?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Oh, I totally agree. And I think that space travel and psychedelics are also connected, like an interest in space, because it just makes your mind expand
Yeah.
so far. And I think there's no coincidence that there was this great push to go to space in the 60s. And then you have the war on drugs. And we kind of, we tend to think that technology just goes in this linear, unbroken line forward. But we kind of, our progress in space went up, and then there was nothing for like 50 years.
Yeah.
And that coincided with the war on drugs. But now it's like we're seeing this resurgence of psychedelics, and our interest in space is,
Yeah.
seems to be shooting up again.
Yeah, man, shooting up to the stars again.
Correlation without, direct causation.
Yeah, it could be, but again, it could, who's to say that somebody, that took LSD in the 1960s didn't then go work for NASA? You know what I'm saying? I mean, just like I ate mushrooms, and that's what inspired me to become a psychedelic historian, So, I mean, I think that's totally possible that happened, like on an individual level, people were just bringing those insights, to the project, whatever that project might be. Yeah, I think that's totally plausible.
Yeah. And say what you want about Elon Musk. He is apparently a big psychedelic user.
Yeah, he's a fan of it.
And he really loved Brian Marescu's book,
Oh, yeah?
Immortality Key. And he had this camp at Burning Man that was all about the Kukion. They made this like giant cup. And they used my video with Brian as inspiration. And they actually made this drone show of some of the drawings in the video that I did with Brian, which was crazy.
Yeah,
Just like
that's
Burning Man, giant, like I draw these trees with DNA strands in them.
Yeah.
And they made like that in the sky. It's just crazy.
It's awesome.
And so it's cool to see how these ideas just percolate throughout culture and trickle their way through everything.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
how like psychedelic folks are now influencing, I mean, essentially the richest man in the world. I mean, like he's inspired by the Immortality Key. He has your artwork up. Like that is literally like the grassroots making these gigantic changes. That's awesome. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, didn't mean to yell, but I told you I get
Yeah.
excited about
No, that
this.
is cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Alex Gray, I had Alex Gray on the show.
Nice.
And he's like my favorite artist of all time. And when you think of psychedelic art, he's number one.
Yeah, of course.
And he has this idea where how art influences culture, and how it's like art is upstream from everything. So he's like, it's the artist's job to go out and have these like deep psychedelic experiences, and then bring those back into the real world, or bring them back into the material world, the visions that you see. And clearly he does that better than anybody.
Yeah, right.
Because like when you see his art, you're like, that's it.
Yeah.
That's the one.
Yeah.
And then it's amazing when you track Alex Gray's art through culture. You know, first it's a psychedelic experience, then it's a painting, then it's on the big stage behind like this band, I don't know, and then it's on the cover of magazines, and then people are wearing it on their shirts.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
and it just, you know, it just trickles through culture.
Yeah.
And then it kind of like, it's like a cycle.
Yeah, I mean, his stuff is so involved, and so is Allison's as well. Both their stuff is just extraordinary.
Totally.
So, you know, you could see it so easily flooding throughout or flowing throughout culture. I mean, it's remarkable what they create. And, you know, there's a truth in art and in poetry that sort of exists beneath the surface a little bit. Like certain truths that are difficult to comprehend, like in prose, can be understood through poetry, can be understood through art. And I think that Allison and Alex, I mean, they do that. I mean, they're the best at it.
Yeah, and I think really good art is mysterious and it's up for interpretation. And you can look at something like the Mona Lisa for 100 years and still not know, is she smiling? Is she smirking?
exactly,
Like, is she got an evil smirk on? Like,
Yeah.
and to me, if you go into art with an intention to make people think something or feel something, to me, that's not art, that's propaganda.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So if you go into it with this, like, I'm going to usher people's mind in this direction, that's propaganda. But if you go with it to kind of create some sort of vision that we can all share in, but we don't really know exactly what it's saying, I think that's art.
So,
Yeah.
but even somebody like, so if I had somebody has a vision and wants, it's like, I want to share what I learned in this vision because I think it's important for people to hear. I could see that as being propaganda, like in a sense, but isn't it more benevolent? Just because the word propaganda has such a, it's such a loaded term, but I think that there's a difference between, you know, like the propaganda of you, like authoritarian propaganda, and the, hey, I sort of had this insight on ayahuasca, I made this painting, you know, whatever it means to you, like, that's awesome, here's what it means to me, and, you know, I just wanted to share that with you. I see that as it's a benevolent form of propaganda, for me.
True.
Anyway.
Yeah. I mean, propaganda could, you know, you could try to coerce people's minds into a good direction.
Yeah,
I
of
guess.
course.
But
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't have to be this dark thing, but I tend to like art that's just up for interpretation.
Sure.
Yeah.
I like both. For me, it's in the piece itself. Like, I take every piece of art on a case-by-case basis, every song on a case-by-case basis, like any art like that. And it's like, yeah, am I seeing what the artist intended? Okay, cool. Do I still love it? Yeah. Oh my God, I had never thought of that before. And yeah, it's propaganda, but it also opened something in my mind that I hadn't considered, you know?
Yeah.
Or, you know, the opposite could be true, where I'm looking at this beautiful piece of art and my interpretation is so radically different from the artist's intention, and perhaps that sparks something in her mind. You know, it's like, oh, I didn't even look at my piece that way, you know? It's just, for me, it's just about sharing ideas and not belittling anybody for having a different opinion. You know, that's really what it all comes down to.
That's a great philosophy. And that brings us neatly along to culture.
Uh-oh.
Yes. Now we're going to get into some more controversial ideology. I had no idea that there was so much controversy in the psychedelic space, but maybe you could lay out, you got a new book coming out, and maybe you could let me know like what you were setting out to accomplish with this new book.
Sure. So it's no secret that identity politics is just tearing society apart. And identity politics can appear both on the extreme right with the Proud Boys, and also the extreme left with burning down cities, you know, between 2020 and 2021, 22.
You've seen it in Portland?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Yes, we did.
Yeah.
We saw that in Portland.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of identity politics in any capacity whatsoever. I find that identity politics, by their nature, are divisive. And so right now in psychedelia, it is left-wing identity politics that is sort of I don't know, getting into the soup and causing issues. And so I wrote a book about why I don't think that's a good idea. And I focus on left-wing politics, identity politics in the book, because in psychedelia, there is no such thing as right-wing identity politics. I couldn't tell you, like, who, the Proud Boy is in psychedelia. I have no idea. So I'm sure that Proud Boys probably eat acid every now and then. I don't know. I don't hang out with those kind of people.
Yeah.
But the book is just about the dangers of identity politics, especially when dealing with plant medicines, psychedelics and entheogens, getting back to them being non-specific amplifiers. I just think it's better if we amplify love, forgiveness, compassion, friendship, helping each other out. Identity politics is sort of the opposite of all that. It's all about, we're the in group and they're the out group. And it just doesn't jive with me at all. And so I just wanted to, express my thoughts about that in the book. And essentially it's me pleading with leaders in psychedelia to give up identity politics, because not only is the research put forth about identity politics, like, it has a lot of issues, and there isn't much truth with a lowercase t to a lot of it, and it's dividing people. Now, I do want to also say that with these sort of left-wing identity politic narratives, there are kernels of truth in there. I'm not denying, like, there are racist people. And the thing is, we don't like them. Like, I don't know who those people are, but if you were to go to, like, the MAPS conference this year, it'd be about 15,000 people. I mean, you'd be hard pressed to find a racist anywhere there, So I guess my question is, why are we saying, like, there are certain psychedelic organizations that are saying, oh, the psychedelic renaissance, it's all so racist, and it's like, okay, well, where is the racism? And you're kind of met with a blank stare. And it's like, yeah, maybe there's one or two people with really dumb racist ideas in psychedelia, but the whole of the movement is about unity. And so, not denying that there are problems, not denying that there are racist jerks that exist, but I feel like certain aspects of that narrative are being exaggerated into areas that just, when you look at history, look at statistics, look at the receipts and the facts, it doesn't stack up at all.
So are these at, like, psychedelic conferences, or?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, because I'm thinking of anytime you get a large group of people together, you get a lot of virtue signaling.
Of course.
You get a lot of status games. People are worried about their reputation. They want to look good.
That's all psychedelic conferences are now.
I've never been to one.
Oh, I used to go to all the time. And I don't go anymore.
So what's happening now at these conferences?
It's a bunch of, you said it yourself, it's a bunch of virtue signaling from the stage, caring more about status than about healing division. It's like, well, I don't want to be the person who says that, like, okay, it's just one thing that I address in the book. That comes from sort of psychedelic left-wing identity politics, is we'll hear all the time that First Nations peoples invented psychedelic therapy and that Western doctors stole it from them. They're, like, appropriated from them.
So we're not, Western people are not allowed to experiment with these things?
Well, not only are we allowed, I mean, these are a God-given birthright to all of humanity, but it simply isn't historically true to say that First Nations peoples invented psychedelic therapy and that Western doctors stole it. Just in the historical record, that is palpably false. It is a very high probability that psychedelic psychotherapy was invented in the West, and a very non-existent probability that it was actually invented by First Nations peoples. First Nations psychedelic rituals involve things like human sacrifice, cannibalism, the complete exclusion of women and the lower classes. Again, like the Aztecs, only the privileged male elite were allowed to eat these mushrooms. Like, the regular guy on the street was not allowed, and certainly no woman was allowed. So it's like, okay, well, where are the Western doctors who are not allowing women, not allowing just average guys? sacrificing people and then eating them. Because if they're not doing that, then they didn't take anything from First Nations psychedelic practices. So I guess what I'm trying to do with the book is just, it comes down to this. We can't have unity if one group of people thinks that another group of people is responsible for all the evil of the world. It will never be unified. What I say is, look, all of our ancestors did some really messed up things. And instead of using that to judge each other today, why don't we look at the past, see the commonality, the horror of it all, and say, let's not do that to each other today. That is the point of this book. Let's not repeat those mistakes. Let's not pretend that anybody who doesn't look like you or is of European heritage is somehow evil and trying to steal your ancestors' psychedelic practices. Most First Nations peoples did not use psychedelics at all. The overwhelming majority did not. It's only in a few remote places with the great cities of Mesoamerica, the Aztec, the Inca, the Maya, and then some smaller groups like the Chichimeck is one of them, the Avavadas, another one, but it's very scattered. And in some cases, and this sort of turns what we think about history on its head, so I know that, some people might, gasp at what I'm about to say, but white Americans and some Englishmen actually were sampling peyote before the majority of First Nations peoples had ever even heard of it. Most First Nations peoples discovered peyote in the late 1800s, early 1900s, because it only grows in one tiny area of the world, which is essentially this strip in the middle of Texas going into Mexico. That's it. And it wasn't until modern roads and horseback riding, which were brought over by Europeans, that peyote could actually spread out of that tiny little location. So white Americans were sampling it before the Cherokee, before the Kickapoo, before the Navajo, before the Comanche. Excuse me, not the Comanche. The Comanche, though, discovered peyote maybe 5 to 10 years before white Americans did. So there isn't really a deep tradition that we're talking about with peyote. When people talk about, people have been using this for thousands of years. Yeah, that's true. There were very few of them, and those few people using it for thousands of years were using it for human sacrifice and cannibalism, and in some cases for community dances as well, which we could all get behind. But sometimes those community dances also ended with a person being sacrificed. Sometimes it didn't. But in most cases, again, even the ones that didn't involve sacrifice, women still weren't allowed to participate. It was the egalitarianism and the first wave of Western feminism that actually influenced First Nations peoples to allow women to join the ceremonies. So are we really all that bad? I don't know. Yeah, we've done some bad stuff. My ancestors did some messed up things. There were some brutalities that the conquistadors perpetrated on the people. That's all true. It's also true that all those First Nations peoples were colonizing each other, slaughtering each other, raping the women of the other people, kidnapping the children and enslaving them. So again, the overall message is all of our ancestors did mess up things that we all find reprehensible. Let's A, stop pretending that only one civilization, Western civilization, was doing it, and B, use the fact that everyone was kind of nasty to each other as a reminder to be kind to each other.
That's very well said. And I can relate to a lot of the things that you were just saying. I almost feel like it's part of human nature to do this. It's a deeply narcissistic thing to try to weaponize guilt and shame in a large group of people to gain power for yourself.
Yeah, that's what critical social justice is.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That's what anti-racism is.
It kind of simplifies the world into these two very simple categories of black and white.
Yep.
When in reality, nothing's black and white. I mean, the whole world is gray.
Yeah.
And the whole idea of cultural appropriation is absurd. It's like, if you don't want anything to do with the culture, you're racist.
Yeah.
But if you like the culture and you want to eat Chinese food or something, all of a sudden you're a racist for eating Chinese food. Like,
Yeah,
what the hell?
no matter
Like, how
what.
can you win?
Well, that's the whole thing. They set it up so that like the DEI instructors, they set it up in a way so that you're not supposed to win, Mark. You're supposed to feel guilty. And if you feel guilty, well, then they did their job. And that's it. If you don't feel guilty, well, they're going to, make sure you do somehow. And yeah, to your point, exactly that. It's like, if you avoid it, you're a racist. If you appreciate it, well, you're appropriating it. And it's like, that's not how culture works at all. Like, so, like, how do we take something as simple as music? Most music, but a lot of it comes from all these different influences. And it's like, if you were to just like sort of take out piecemeal all of the influences, you're going to have way less interesting music.
And you can't live that way. I mean,
No,
what are
of
we
course
supposed to
not.
do? Like, white people only use things that white people invented, and if
Yeah,
like,
we
you're
did
not allowed
that
to
and it
use
was
a,
called Jim Crow and it was a stupid idea, so let's not do it again. Like, we
Yeah.
already tried that in this country and it was awful. Let's not do that. Let's share. There's a documentary filmmaker came by and screened a film of with my community building up in Portland. And one of the things that the medicine men said at the end of this documentary, he was like, no, it's like, we don't want to be separated. It's like, you have so much, talking to like Westerners, you have so much to share with us and we have so much to share with you. So let's all share these technologies. And I'm like, yes, like this guy gets it, he's got it. And that's what I want to see more of. And we can't have that if we're all wrapped up in identity politics. We just doesn't work. It's inherently divisive.
I totally agree. I saw a video that really made me smile. This guy put on a sombrero and a mustache and a poncho, and he went to like a college campus.
Yeah.
And everybody said, "You're being offensive, hateful. Take that off." Everybody.
Yeah.
And then he goes to Mexican community, and everybody's like, "Oh, I
Yeah,
like
you
your
look
outfit,
great."
man."
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
it's like Latinx is a great example. Or is that the term, Latinx? Latinx?
Honestly, I don't know anybody who even uses that
Yeah.
term.
I mean, I play soccer with tons of Mexican guys. And one day I was like, do you guys know what Latinx is? They don't even know what it is.
Yeah, exactly.
And I was like, it's something that an academic intellectual made up to say that, I know better than you.
Yeah, of course.
And like, I'm going to fix the world.
Yeah,
my
of
vision of
course.
the, stand back while I fix the world. And people were like, there wasn't a problem,
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you ever have a college professor telling you they're trying to fix the world? Run. Because
Yes.
that is that's a demagogue in training right there.
'Cause they don't live in the real world.
They don't live in the real
Yeah.
world. And yeah, exactly. Like they invent, and it's a virtue signal. It's like, yeah, it's to the whole Latinx, or I've heard it pronounced like Latinx. I've also heard, again, I don't know people that use the term, so I'm not totally
You
sure.
can't even say it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it doesn't roll off the tongue. And it's like, the other thing is like, Spanish is a gendered language.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you have the neuter, of course, but like, it doesn't even make sense within the language, and it's just very virtue signally, and it doesn't, like, yeah, I don't know any Mexican people that actually use it, and it's just this way of dividing us more. So I write in Psychedelic Injustice, the book that's coming out, how where I think all of this identity politics, it's existed in the United States, since 50s, 60s, all of that, but only recently was getting shoved down our throats. And I think that goes back to the Occupy Wall Street movement, because I was one of like the first, some friends of mine and I were among some of the first 50 to 100 people that gathered at Zuccotti Park. Like, it wasn't even called the Occupy Wall. Like, it wasn't called anything yet. It was just, I was at this open mic. I was part of this open mic community. We heard about this happening going on downtown, so we all went down there. And here's what I think happened. All these bankers and corporate guys, I won't be insulting, these corporate people, they looked down and they saw how unified we were. Because at Occupy Wall Street, Black Americans, white Americans, Asian Americans, Southeast Asian Americans, white collar, blue collar, gay, trans, straight, we were all standing unified, going, fuck you to these corporations. Yeah. So then what happens a few years later? They start flooding us with this, not to sound all conspiratorial, but I back it up with receipts in my book. So they started flooding us with all this DEI stuff, all this identity politics stuff. And so that we wouldn't see each other as unified, right? Because when we're unified, saying, fuck these corporations, that's really bad for business. When we're divided, we're all shopping a lot more. That's really good for business. And so they just flooded our society with this crap, keeping us separated. So now it's not we the people against the corporations that screwed us. It's the trans person versus the straight guy who's against the Japanese woman, and the Japanese woman is against the Latina woman. And it's like, and now we're all back to fighting and squabbling with each other instead of addressing what I believe to be, for lack of a better word, and I know it's a loaded term, but the real enemy. The real enemy, in my opinion, it's the deep state. It's the corporatists that fund the deep state, and the deep state that allows the corporatists to get away with doing the horrible things they do. And that wedding of, you know, these corporations with the deep state, I think that that is what actually drove this new, like, relentless identity politics down our throats.
That's very well said. Yeah, you just made me think of a lot of things. For one, how disingenuous these corporations are. I mean, all of a sudden, when the time was right and they were reading the room, they all got on board this like DEI, like pride stuff.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, I'm seeing like Raytheon, they make bombs. And they're like touting these like pride flags. I'm like, are you going to put like pride flags on your bombs that you drop on people? Like,
yeah, right.
Is that going to make the bomb like different?
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, your company is about killing people.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Don't pretend like that if you post this one picture, you're going to virtue signal and that's going to like cleanse your sins.
But that's the heist. That's exactly what it is. That's the whole thing. And that's what they've been able to get away with, is exactly that. We're going to go bomb a whole bunch of people. We're going to slaughter innocents, women and children. Who cares? But look, we got a pride flag on our window. Aren't we just, you know, the cat's pajamas?
I think people are figuring that out now.
Well, I think
which is why they're abandoning it.
Yeah.
You know, the second people started figuring out their like little grift, they abandoned it. And it's like, that just shows even more how little you actually cared about the issue. Because the second the winds turned, you were like, oh, you know, I'm going to take these pictures down. You know, it's like,
of course. Yeah. I mean, they put it up for 1 month, you know, Pride Month, they'll put the flag up. And then it's back to, who cares? You know, doesn't matter, because they don't care in the first place. And again, I agree with you, Mark, that people are absolutely getting what I think, and I'm sure I'm going to get some hell for saying this. I think that's why Trump won in such a grand way that he did. I think that people, I mean, all 7 swing states, the popular vote, and the electoral college. I mean, who does that?
I think we might get some flack for saying that in Portland, but online, and everyday folk can see why Trump won, because they were just getting gaslit and pushed into a corner where they were like,
and it was obvious,
you know, like, I have to just trust my eyes at a certain point. Like, you're telling me the story that is not true. And there's only so many times you can get gaslit.
And what I'm fond of saying is like, all right, well, what do you trust more, your lying eyes or the government?
Right. Yeah, I mean, we can get into some deep stuff here, but I do think that this speaks to human nature, where I've seen this happen so many times at universities. Whenever you get a big group of people, you get a lot of agreeable people that just they don't want to stand out. They don't want to be called hateful or anything. So they just agree with whatever the group's doing.
Of course.
And then you get this 1 or 2 narcissists in the room that see, okay, I can use this to gain power for myself. Mm-hmm. And if anybody challenges them, they say, "Oh, you're an ist. You're a phobe," and they sit down. And and then everybody just goes along. And I've seen these ridiculous, egregious scenarios happen, and I don't say anything because I don't want to get fired or called out. But I just sit there and I'm like, this is absurd. This person leading the room is a narcissist, and they're making this whole conference about themselves.
Yeah, and
I feel like that's might be what's happening in these psychedelic conferences.
That's exactly what's happening.
Because people on their own doing psychedelics, they're not, I mean, psychedelics are a totally separate thing than human nature at these conferences, I feel like.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
But it's sad that it's getting tainted with this
Well,
Yeah.
but only if we allow it. And that's why I wrote this book, is to just give people the heads up. And if everybody chooses identity politics and psychedelia, it's a shame, but we live in a democracy. The people have spoken. But I just want everyone to have the heads up that these things are going on. I don't think it's good for the movement. I don't think it's good for the individual. It's definitely not good for the world we live in. So just, heads up, these things are happening, and what we choose to do after that, that conversation is yet to be had. But first, I want everyone to at least, be aware of it.
Yeah, I think it's really important that you're putting this into words, because we do have the words for when right-leaning people go wrong. When they go too far, we have, you're a racist, you're hateful, you're a transphobe, homophobe.
Yeah.
We have all these words when they are exclusionary, or they put up their borders. You hate, you're xenophobe, you hate foreigners. We have all these labels that we can lob onto them, but we don't have labels for when left-leaning people go too far. We just don't have the language for it, really.
Yeah.
I guess that's why woke became a big thing, because that was the first word we had. Oh, that's woke. We didn't really have language before to call out when something was getting too like hypersensitized to suffering, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's nothing wrong at all about being sensitive to suffering. I mean,
Correct.
I'm sensitive to suffering. Most people are sensitive to suffering. But I guess my point is that some of the things that we're hearing about, who is suffering isn't, I mean, these are, professors making six figures at elite universities. It's like you're getting hundreds of thousands of dollars in grant money. Like, are you really suffering? Is that what suffering is? I mean, it's like
the irony is, in the most privileged areas is where you get this complaint the most.
Oh, of course.
You don't hear about this wokeness in Afghanistan or something.
Oh no, of course not.
Yeah,
they have like other things to worry about other than their pronouns. They have real problems.
It's only in the most tolerant places where you
get
accused of being hateful.
Yeah, and that's why they use, it's one of the things I don't like, they use our tolerance and our compassion against us, because the identitarian left knows that people like you and me can't stand racism. They know we don't like it. They know we're not transphobes, and they're going to use that against us by calling us a racist or calling us transphobes. And it's like it's so deceitful and it's so dishonest. And I'm, in a gentle manner, not in an aggressive one, I am looking forward to a major pushback. And I hope that the book can help with that, that people will sort of see that the narratives that are being fed, while there are kernels of truth in there, I'm not going to say there aren't, because there are, but there's this exaggeration and this abstraction. They make these academic abstractions that, when you get into the nuance, they just completely fall apart,
It's the kind of ideas that could only survive in academia.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
It's a kind of idea that could only survive in somebody, just in academia.
It works on campus, except it doesn't work in reality.
No, of course not. And ultimately, I don't even think it works on the campus. Like, I think that's where you'll find it, but I don't even know how well it's working.
I mean, I think left-wing ideology is so pervasive because it does tell a story that's half true.
Well, of course, and that's the thing. That's what I'm saying. There are kernels of truth. Like, are there racist people in the United States? Yep, there are. However, does screaming white supremacy in the streets and burning your city down solve that? Nope.
They just haven't burned it enough.
Yeah, right. But that's the thing. Yeah, it's like, sadly, that's sort of. I open up the book with a conversation I had with this young lady. There was a BLM march through my neighborhood, and she was talking about burning the library. It was right by my house, burning it to the ground. And I was like, well, wait, what? Why are we going to burn that? And she literally was saying, well, it's because it was built during the era of Jim Crow. And so her idea was we have to burn that library down and literally rebuild a new library in its place. And it's like, well, why don't we just leave the library alone? Because bricks and mortar can't absorb racism. They can't absorb Jim Crow. And, I go to that library all the time, and I see people of every ethnicity in there and nobody seems to be having a problem. Like, why are we burning it down? But that was the mentality, is that like, oh, well, the carpeting is racist. It's like, well, that carpeting was put in 1992, or whatever, but it's like, but that's this ideology. It's so pervasive to the point where it's like, you're not even making any sense. Like, however, as just one current example, like, however one feels about the current situation with Israel and Palestine, I don't know enough about it to say anything, but there's literally a group, I think they're called Queers for Palestine or Gays for Palestine. It's like, you will be executed in Palestine for being gay or being queer. And in fact, the only safe refuge for trans and gay people in Palestine is Israel. It's like your entire philosophy, it's like your head is so far up your ass, you're not even making sense anymore. I mean, you might as well, are you also a satanic Christian? Like, are you a Republican jihadist? Like, what are we talking about here? It doesn't even make sense, but that's like how screwy the ideology is, and how sadly, and I really hate to say this about my country folk, but just how easily manipulated we really are.
Yeah, well said. I am encouraged though. I think that we have hit peak wokeness.
Oh yeah.
I think it passed. You're seeing companies abandoning it. Colleges all over the country are having to get rid of DEI.
Well, we're not funding I mean, Trump got rid of it. There's no more DEI funding. And on a business level, I don't know how true this is, but I do have it on good authority that a lot of these big businesses, they are not hiring people out of Yale, Harvard, like essentially the Ivy Leagues, because they're like, I need you thinking about the job, not what your pronouns are going to be tomorrow. They're not hiring them anymore because they don't want that. It's just, come on, it's nonsense.
I mean, you're hiring an activist.
Yeah, basically. Exactly. And like, I wouldn't hire an activist because I look, we're here to help people. We're here to get a job done. I'm not, you have your views about yourself and the world, and that's totally cool. Like, I don't care. Think about yourself. Oh, you're an adult. You think if you want me to call you Abraham Lincoln, I will. I don't think you're Abraham Lincoln because I'm not a Civil War scholar, but I know a little bit about the Civil War. I know a little bit about Abraham Lincoln, and I know that you're not him. But if you want me to call you Abraham Lincoln, I will, even though I don't believe it. And if you want me to use whatever pronouns you want me to use, I will, even if I don't actually think that you're a Zif or a Zer or whatever, the neo pronoun things are, and I guess maybe I'm just an old fart. Could be that. Yeah. It could just be a generational thing. But I also feel like, I mean, the earmarks of a fashion trend are all over it. I mean, even AOC took her pronouns off of her or not Twitter, X now. And it's like, yeah, because to your point, like we reached it already and it's coming to an end. And it's like, yeah, you know what we call that? That's not a revolutionary. That's not social change. That's a fashion trend. You're just buying a corporate-made fashion trend and believing that you're actually being rebellious by doing it. It's like, dude, Wall Street invented this. You think you're being rebellious? They invented this to sell you a flag, either a trans flag or a private. That's all this is. So just, keep in mind that that's all they're really doing. The number of like detransitioners that have come out recently, again, we're showing that the trend's over. Now, of course, there are real trans people, like without a doubt, but there is, of course, a fashion trend aspect to this, just like punk rock. There are real gutter punks, like real deal. And there's also the Hot Topic mall punk, it's a fashion trend.
Yeah, I largely agree. It's interesting that if politicians and CEOs of giant corporations are on the side of your protest, you're not a revolutionary.
Yeah, right.
You're being used.
Yeah, you're being used.
Yeah.
You're being propagandized.
I think on the deepest level, it comes down to Marxist ideology.
Oh yeah,
this is where it stems from.
Yeah.
Because Marxism harnesses energy from people who feel from resentment, from bitterness, and so. Initially, it went to like the workers and it said, hey, you guys have been exploited by the people that own the factories. It's the proletariat versus the bourgeoisie. And that's where the energy was. But now today in America, capitalism has uplifted so many people that the workers don't want to do the revolution. They've got a flat screen TV, they've got electricity, they're they're living comfortably. The energy is not with the working class anymore.
Nope.
They're actually the evil ones now.
Yeah.
The energy is cultural Marxism now.
Yes,
it's
exactly.
it's with people who feel like they've been neglected or that their ancestors were treated in a certain way. It's this like echo of something from the past, or it's like you've been mistreated because of some way that you've been born. That's where the energy is. And I think that energy is starting to die out a bit.
Yeah.
So I think this impulse is fading away, but the revolution never ends.
Yeah.
So it will find some other group of people that feels disenfranchised or neglected or used and abused, and it will harness their energy from them.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and
yeah.
I think you're 100% correct. I mean,
Yeah.
Herbert Marcuse, in his essay on liberation, essentially says that. He says, we were fighting against capitalism, and capitalism's actually helped a lot of people. So we can't attack it anymore because so many of the working class, they want to actually achieve a higher, wage and a better lifestyle. So they're sort of climbing for it. So we can't use that. So he settled on two groups. One which he called, and I'm quoting him now, the ghetto population, and the other was left-wing intelligentsia, which is why all of the colleges and universities, to your point earlier, were flooded with this DEI because they essentially, drank the Kool-Aid. And I mean, even like the woman herself who coined the word critical race theory, Kimberly Crenshaw, literally says that she was a Marxist. Richard Delgado and Gene Stefanik, who were also big pushers of they all say, yeah, we were Marxists. And they just became identity Marxists. To your point, I have a chapter on that in my book. Like you
wow.
pretty much nailed.
Yeah.
You pretty much nailed it, man. Like that's, I think historically, I mean, we got plenty of receipts that point to what you said about this, like how that trajectory unfolded, being totally right. And the thing is, like, even if Marxism were a good idea, like the economic Marxism, or what the neo-Marxists call vulgar Marxism, it couldn't even work today because how society operates has changed. In Marx's day, let's say you had 20 carpenters. Which of those 20 carpenters were the proletariat? Which ones were the bourgeoisie? All of them were proletariat. How about today? If you have 20 carpenters, which one's the proletariat? Which one's the bourgeoisie? Well, some of them are going to be low-income carpenters, and some of them are going to be millionaire contractors eventually. You know what I'm saying? People also marry across classes more these days. So it's like, I'm engaged right now, and it's like...
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And it's like, so is my fiance, like, let's say I like worked on Wall Street, like, is my fiance going to overthrow me now? That she doesn't work on Wall Street. She's an artist and a musician, like she doesn't like really think about all the stuff that we've been talking about. It's just not, she's just not interested in it. But it's like, yeah, well, like with Marxism, how would that work? Well, it wouldn't. So they went after identity, to your point. And that's also fading away fast because it's such bad medicine.
It's a dead end road.
It's a dead end road, and it just it doesn't, like, where are we going with this? Just to more cities burning, more hatred, more division? Like, is that what we really want the psychedelic renaissance to be? We have access to the most important tools for discovering the mind, the soul, our purpose. And are we going to give the mushrooms to people and say, oh, go hate people that look different from you? Is that really what we want the psychedelic renaissance to be? And if it is, fine, but just count me out. I don't want anything to do with that.
Yeah, it's astonishing that somebody could do psychedelics and then come away with this philosophy of black versus white, us versus them still.
Right?
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine too, but some people, but it's like, if you have beaten into your head every day, you're oppressed, these people hate you. It's like, I don't hate anybody, and I'm not oppressing a damn soul. Like, I don't like, so it's like, and my best guess, you aren't either. And neither is anyone I know. And what I'll sometimes ask sort of the identitarian left in psychedelia, and they're like, oh, well, because you're not an oppressed person. So, well, so you're oppressed? And I'll say, yeah. I'm like, okay, tell me about your oppression. What is that? What was the racist thing that happened to you today?
And the response will be that you're hateful, you're ist.
Well,
Yeah.
usually they're so stumped by the question, I'm met with a blank stare, because again, they've been fed you're oppressed by their professors, have never thought about it for more than 2 seconds. And so when we just ask, well, tell me, how are you oppressed? You're racist. Like you're right. Like sometimes you'll get that, but most of the time you're just met with a blank stare, or you're met with things that happen to everybody. Like when I'm walking down the street in my neighborhood in Portland, if a woman is jogging on my, like she crosses the street because I'm a man. And it's more likely that a man is going to attack a woman than a woman's going to attack a man. I bring this up because a good friend of mine that also works with me on the Timothy Leary archive, Black American, awesome dude, great artist. And I'd asked him, well, what was the racist thing that happened? He's like, oh, well, this woman was jogging and, like I was walking, she crossed the street. I'm like, they do that to me too, dude. It's not because you're black or I'm white. It's because we're both men. Race has nothing to do with it, dude. So, you have to maybe stop and think 2 seconds. Like, is this something everybody experiences? I was on a conference call the other day. I can't get too deeply into what the call is about because we're trying to change the laws around plant medicines in Portland. But this woman was talking about, she's, I believe she's Latina. And she was talking about, how when she gets pulled over, it's a different situation. I'm like, in my book, I have stories of me getting pulled over and being abused by police too. It's like, look, I've been arrested by Black American police officers. I've stood before Black American judges. Like, don't tell me I had some sort of invisible privilege in those situations, because I absolutely did not. I've also stood before white American judges. This is America. Like, you're going to stand before any number of different ethnicities if you're in court. Where in the world, like from top to bottom, like look at our Congress. We have the most diverse Congress of the entire planet for all of human history. Our all of our institutions, they're the most diverse you'll find anywhere in the world. It's like, so what are y'all talking about?
Yeah, I think there's been a major psyop that happened where people got equality confused with equity.
Yes.
That's been huge.
Yes.
Because like equality is something that's very simple. We all get the same resources. We start from the same point, and whatever happens from there happens, Equity is freaky because it's like you got to have this puppeteer at the top that makes sure that everybody crosses that finish line at the same time. So this person starts here and this person starts there. And it always requires this third party or an endless amount of third parties making sure that everything's equal. And what happens is people aren't elevated to the top. They're all chopped down to the bottom. It's like a race to the bottom.
Yeah, it is.
And the words sound so similar that they often get confused, but they couldn't be more different.
I actually write something like that in my book. I literally say, even though these words sound similar, they are very, very different. And look, the truth of the matter is we don't all start at the same point. And I am all in favor with giving a leg up to someone who started in the back. I am perfectly fine with that. What I'm not okay with is simply basing that on skin color instead of situation. Because that's just really racist. To assume that, any minority kid needs that extra help. Oh, the great white savior. No, that kid's perfectly capable. He could do it. What about that other, white American kid that was born in Appalachia, dirt poor, with nothing, with not even running water in the house? Like, can we give it to that kid instead of the Black American kid that comes from a two-parent, nice middle-class home? Like, it's like, just because, like, the skin color should not determine who gets that extra help. And so I'm all fine with giving that help if the person needs it. What I'm not okay with, so, I started here, so I get these resources. You started here, so you get a little bit more resources. Fine. But once we both get to that finish line, like if you haven't made it, that doesn't mean that now you get to take the resources from other people to push you through the line, because we already did that. We already gave you that. Like, we made up for that. Now it's on you. And if you can't make do, well, we did everything we could. But then equity comes in and says, oh, no, no, no. We're going to not only push you through, but we're going to hold this other person back. And I'm telling you, you know, when I get on an airplane, the last thing I care about at all is the diversity of the engineers that built that plane. I want only the best engineers that built the plane. I want the best person in the control tower, and I want the best pilots. And if all of those people just so happen to be Mexican, perfect. I don't care, because I just want that plane to take off and land. I don't care if they're all from Shanghai. I don't care if they could all be trans Black American women or Black American trans women. Fine with me. Are they the best engineers, the best pilots, the best ground control? Yep. Don't care at all.
Yeah, sadly, I think this whole DEI stuff has led to more racism.
Oh,
obviously,
it is racism. But that's what DEI is.
But even after the end result, like let's say you do perfectly orchestrate a workforce that is exactly the way you want to represent it, the customer is still going to have those questions in their mind, like, is this person a good worker, or are they a DEI hire?
Yeah.
And now that word DEI hire has been painted as a very offensive term.
Yeah.
But that's the term that you guys made up.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's the thing. Like, it's kind of like woke. Like the left started using woke first, and then everyone just sort of, it became a term of abuse. And oh no, we don't want to do it. It's like, you're the ones that brought it to the table. We're just showing you how inefficient it is, you know. But it's like, since you brought it up, sure, let's talk about it. And you know, with and there's another problem with especially with college admissions, with DEI admissions, that's actually really not good for the student, because what happens is with college, like, it's called mismatch, where it's like you really shouldn't be at this Ivy League institution, but due to equity you are. What can happen, and it does happen, is that kid takes out $100,000 loans, but isn't really up to the task of being, you know, at Stanford or whatever. They drop out. You still owe that money back, and now you are crippled with debt for the rest of your life.
You can't file for bankruptcy.
Yeah, and you can't do anything. Whereas if you would have just gone to the college you could afford, like I did, I went to college. I went to state schools because that's what I could afford. You know, and the other thing, college. Look, what matters is what you make of yourself. That's what actually matters. So, you know, people born behind the eight ball, yeah, it's going to be more tough for you, 100%. And hopefully there are resources there to, you know, get you up to where other people start, you know. But yeah, I can rant on and on.
Yeah, I mean, this is a topic we could go on forever.
Yeah.
I think this identity politics is dying. This phase of it is dying because the colleges are destroying themselves. Like the degree isn't worth that much anymore. You know, people hiring are like going to look at this degree and like, what did you major in? You know, dog walking or gender studies or something?
Yeah, gender studies.
Yeah, I mean, like
anything with studies after it, you're getting a nonsense. If studies appears in the name, you're getting a nonsense.
Or science. If you have to add science onto like social science, political science, it's not a science.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well said. I mean, I didn't. When you initially reached out to me to do the podcast, I didn't think we were going to be talking about this stuff. I thought we were going to just stick to psychedelics, but I didn't realize that this ideology had infected that space so much. But
yeah, I mean, well, my fear is that there's not going to be much left of psychedelics if this ideology continues.
Well, I mean, psychedelics are always going to be there, but maybe the conferences and
I mean, the
institutions.
sort of, our ability to, like, right now we actually have people that are like Elon Musk, you were saying, RFK Jr. Like, we literally have people in the White House that are in favor of psychedelics. When J.D. Vance was on Joe Rogan, Rogan brought up, you know, like psychedelic assisted therapy for addiction, because Vance grew up with a mother who struggled with addiction. And it sounded to me like what I got was like this was brand new to him, but he wasn't closed off to it. I mean, I don't think that guy's closed off to any new idea. He just seems to have that sort of personality where it's like, all right, well, let me check it out. And, you know, if it's vibing, let's go further. And if not, we'll leave it aside. That's sort of what I get from him. You know, for me, my whole thing is I don't care who wins the election. I want that person to do a good job for my country folk. That's it. I just want you guys to do a good job so that I want you to lower prices so people could afford groceries and not have this burden on them when they have children. I want us to be fair and equal. I want our justice system to promote justice, not equitable law, which is tearing cities apart right now. I don't know if you know much about equitable law, but what we were talking about equity, that's now, and it's scary, it's being applied to law. So it doesn't matter how horrific the offense, provided you have the right immutable characteristics, you're going to be in and out.
Yeah, I've looked into this because I used to live in San Francisco, where that was like ground zero for it.
Sure.
And so there's a class of people that can do no wrong, and it's a religious movement. It's like they are sacred. Mm-hmm. This person can go into a store, they can take a dump on the aisle, they can grab as much merchandise as they want. They can walk out, and we're not going to, because they don't have free will. They're a victim.
Yep.
But you have a car and you have a job. Okay, we're going to give you a parking ticket because you didn't turn your wheel. Like,
yeah.
Wait, what? Why are you punishing this person?
Exactly.
Oh, they have a car. They're an oppressor. It's like,
yeah.
And I think, there's always second and third order effects.
Of course.
So now all the businesses are leaving the downtown area. It's like a ghost town. And now there's nowhere to even rob. And I literally saw articles saying that these companies leaving are racist or they're hateful. And it's like, it is not their responsibility to be like an open food buffet for anybody who wants to rob the place. Like they're a business trying to survive.
Yeah.
If the city wants to provide these resources, they can do it, but it's not up to these like small business owners to do that.
Yeah. And you know why oppression is not a good excuse for that? Because during the 1930s, during the 20s, during real Jim Crow systemic racism, nobody was doing that. Nobody was going and taking a dump in the aisle and just taking however much merch off the shelf. Nobody was doing that. And they were actually suffering real systemic government oppression, and they weren't doing that. So when people say, oh, it's because they're oppressed today, it's like, no. Sorry, I don't buy it. How come people during real Jim Crow could control themselves, but you can't today? You're not oppressed. You're a spoiled brat. In the words of Thomas Sowell, I'm paraphrasing here. When you're used to preferential treatment, being treated like an equal can feel like oppression.
Well said.
Well, Thomas Sowell said it.
Yeah. He also said, when you want to help people, you tell them the truth.
Yeah.
When you want to help yourself, you tell them what they want to hear.
Yeah.
So exactly. I feel like a lot of this DEI equity stuff, it makes the person implementing the policy feel very good about themselves.
Oh, of course. They're so virtuous.
But it really doesn't actually help the person that they're seeking to help.
No, I cite in my book, I cite the studies that literally show that, it's funny, DEI actually causes more racism. To no one's surprise, really, but it actually, it causes more. Every study that's been done on DEI is like, this is really, really bad for people. We should not be doing this. In fact, it got so bad, I write about this, it was a principal in this high school in Toronto, Blitzko, I believe is his last name, and he endured DEI training, and when he questioned the instructor, he was so belittled by the instructor and by his virtue signaling peers that he killed himself. Again, I say to the people of psychedelia, is that what we want our psychedelic renaissance to be? Is that really the end goal that we're all marching towards?
I see it like a pendulum. And in the past, we were swung really far one way, patriarchy, supremacy,
racism,
all these things.
Absolutely.
That was real, but the pendulum never stops at this perfect balance point. So right now, we're kind of seeing the backlash of the people want revenge. They don't want, equality is not good enough. They want
mastery.
Heads. Yeah. So now we're seeing this backlash, and we might see an equally hateful backlash.
That's the thing. We're going to. And I shouldn't say we're going to. I already sort of see it beginning, and that's not the answer either. Stop throwing the pendulum back so far the other way, because then they're just going to throw it back at the other side. You don't change somebody's behavior by abusing them the same way they abused you. You change somebody's behavior by showing them a better way that doesn't involve abuse, where we could all sit at the table, have a talk, and then leave that table feeling good about the conversation. That's how you actually do. Or I shouldn't say that because I don't know, but that's the way I'm going to try to do it. Like, let's build a bigger table, invite everybody to sit, and just recognize that, you know, I know it's a cliche, but we have so much more in common. There's so much more that brings us together than separates us. And if we could just recognize that truth, I don't know, I think that we have a much better chance of making psychedelia mainstream for those that could benefit from it. Again, you got Musk, doing the Eleusinian mysteries with your artwork there, RFK Jr. in the White House, JD Vance open to it. Like this whole idea that we're supposed to fear people that we disagree with. It's like I just made a video about a response to a guy named Jules Evans, and he wrote this article for the New York Times it's called How the Right Wing in America Learned to Love Psychedelics or something like that. And essentially his whole article is like, well, I don't like people on the right, therefore they shouldn't do, and they're not going to care about safety protocols because they're rich. It's like, what? Like, first of all, you don't know that. You don't know what Elon Musk thinks about safety protocols. Like, so why are you saying that, oh, well, he's too rich to care about safety? It's like, dude, you're being unnecessarily divided. Have you ever talked to Elon Musk about his thoughts on psychedelics? No? Well, then maybe stop speculating until you do. And the hard part is I don't want to see psychedelics politicized by any political ideology. But at the same time, how do we talk about not politicizing psychedelia without inadvertently politicizing psychedelia? I don't know. I don't know.
Maybe we just don't even talk about it. Like we talk about it once and then we put it to rest.
We can do that, but if we do that, my fear is that the identitarian left in psychedelia is just going to push back way hard. Like I'm hoping. This is going to sound so quixotic. I am hoping for a united front. I'm hoping that people read this book and say, you know what? I'm tired of this too. But I'm not tired in an aggressive way. I'm not going to swing the pendulum back so far. I'm going to be measured and chill about it and have conversations and hope that we could come to an understanding. Because that's what the psychedelic renaissance and the larger world needs right now.
Hear, hear. Well said. On that note, Thomas Hatsis.
Mark Woodick.
This was a good conversation.
Thank you. I had a lot of fun, man.
So when does your new book come out?
June 16th.
Sweet. Yeah. That's going to be exciting and really important. And where can people check out more of your work?
You could go to thomashatsis.com. You can go to Sanctum, that's PSANCTUM.org. You can find me on Instagram at Psychedelic Historian, although that might change because Meta's doing the sweep of psychedelia, like psychedelic profiles. So I'm probably going to change it to just at Thomas Hatsis or at Tom Hatsis, whichever one's available. I have a YouTube channel, Psychedelic Historian. Eat some mushrooms and find me up in the ether as well.
Sweet. Well, this has been a great episode. Thank you.
Thank you.